the agenda review.
Yeah.
We are going to go in about 45 minutes. What and why and who and where is garden sharing? What are the garden sharing processes and tools? What can go wrong? Because things do go wrong. They go incredibly right, but they also go wrong. Anyone who participated in our conflict resolution for gardens workshop knows that. Tips for successful matches, gardening facts and FAQ, and question answers and resources. Now, our goal is to get most of this done around or our information by 8. We know that this is Ramadan, and usually around 8 o'clock is when people go for prayers. So our plan is to get all of the information done by 8. You are welcome to just leave if you need to. We are possibly just going to continue on after that with question and answers, which we can share on email. There are an incredible amount of resources that Rhonda has put together that has been put together before and by Rhonda. And so all of this, you already had many things shared with you, and there'll be the resources both on the Greenest City website and the Toronto Urban Grower website. That's it. Okay, so the who, what, Rhonda, did you post the results?
I did.
Thank you, I missed that because I was going back and forth between what I was saying and the screen.
Yeah.
Okay, so what is garden sharing? So the great garden sharing is where people who have space but aren't using it offer it to a local grower. And then the grower and the landholder make an agreement about how they share the produce. So it could be that the grower is just growing food for themselves and sharing it with the landholder or community food programs. And then the great thing is that the landholder then makes good use of their garden space, and it's a win for everyone. We're going to talk about where these happen and how these happen next. So Jesse was asking a little bit about how, what a great idea this is. Well, this idea has been going on for a long time, and there's a lot of history around this. Garden or yard sharing have existed across North America, and in Toronto, anywhere from like a simple web-based matching system to so-and-so has land, so-and-so wants to grow, and they get together. Or there was full support programs like the STOP's YIMBY program, which, Rhonda, how many years ago did that start at the YIMBY program? Like for a long time, at least 10 or 12.
That would have started 2012, I think.
Yeah, so somewhere around 10 years. And there's other versions of this now, as Rhonda is showing on the screen. There's liberating lawns, there's yard share, there's crop shop. There's all different kinds of examples of how this looks. Liberating Lawns is here in Toronto, and you can see that under Sundance Harvest. And they're the web-based, and you can see the different types of supports the Sundance Harvest Farm has. And then there's a web-based version of this on yardshareto.ca, and those are in the chat. So why would you want to do this? Why on earth? Now, I'm assuming that everyone that's here, if people are able to put in the chat, why do you want to do this? Tell me, just put that in the chat. Why on earth would you want to, would you want to do something like this? Now, you're all here for a good reason. I'm assuming either you have land or you want to grow food, but what is it that makes you really want to be able to share a space with someone? So there's all sorts of benefits that we know of. Yep, thank you, land back, good. Grow food and be close to the earth, thank you. It builds community, so I get an opportunity to meet my neighbors. Underused space into green space. We can have conversations about lawns, or what is the benefits for our land and the earth and the insects by having wonderful diversity of plants growing. Supports food justice and increases access to a healthy food. There are so many benefits to us personally, as a person who might have land or a person who wants to grow food on the land.
Okay, so now we're going to get to you a little excited about some of the places where you could be growing food and get you to think a little creatively about different spaces. Yes, you can grow food in front yards of residential properties, and here are a couple of examples in front of Toronto Community Housing. I think one of the most successful examples of yard sharing that I know of would be this next one, which is Jesse and Jow, who has 4 different yards that he's growing in, and this is his full-time business, selling the produce from it. And this is in Etobicoke. So it's also possible to be growing in driveways, patios, decks, courtyards around apartment buildings, storefronts, and office buildings. So here's an example of a garden that's growing food for a local food bank outside on St. Clair Avenue West. And so it looks quite beautiful. And also here's some spaces that are, there's beside a staircase at U of T, and this is a courtyard at Ryerson University. So you don't need a large space. You can be quite productive in a rather small space that's not being used for anything else. So think beyond just houses, think about commercial properties, think about faith organizations, think about courtyards around high-rise towers or condos. And then the other thing we wanted to encourage you to think about is think inside the box. So if the ground where you would like to grow isn't suitable, there are spaces for containers, maybe. Here there's a balcony that has these little plastic swimming pools that have been filled with soil. On the right-hand side, you'll see some raised beds that have been built right beside a swimming pool. So lots of possible ways that you could use containers to fill up a space with plants, and also consider vertical growing. So can you grow up a vertical space like these beans on the right-hand side here have done? So now I think it's a good time to get into the garden sharing process. And we sent out to you, I hope you've had a chance to take a look at them, the 3 tools that we offer up on our website. So one of them is a set of questions to ask a potential gardener. So if you're a landholder, there's questions to think through, you know, is this a good fit, this person? Then there's some questions for gardeners to ask the landholders. And then finally, there's a template agreement that the both of you would sit down together and go through. And the whole purpose to this is to get people thinking about what your expectations are, because people come with a whole raft of ideas about how they want the space to be used, what they can expect to have in that space. And by having that conversation and by putting it down on paper, then you're going to have a better shared understanding. Now, the tools that we're offering, we don't claim that this is any kind of screening process. That screening process is entirely up to both parties to the agreement. So it's limited in terms of support, but it's been kind of tested in the field. So we're pretty confident that this will help you at least think through what it is that you want from this. So the way that it goes is that we have a form for both landholders and for gardeners on the TUG website. You can fill out that form and then email that, and then that will be submitted to us. We will post that information on our page. So people who are looking for land or they're looking for a gardener can look through the page and see if there's someone in their neighborhood, and then contact them, contact us directly. I say that for a reason. There are some websites that actually do ask you to post your own email or phone number, and we don't think that's a very good security system. You know, I think it's leaves people open, if nothing else, to being spammed, and we don't want that. So by asking people to contact us, we cut down on that opportunity for spam. it still doesn't screen people, so you still need to do that, but it means that people are really interested in connecting over garden sharing. One of the things that we do ask in the form is we'll ask people if they have any preferences for a match, aside from the geographic preference. So if you're someone who's trans or BIPOC and you would like to connect with someone who may be trans positive or BIPOC positive, you can indicate that to us. And that's one layer of screening that we will do, because we think it is really important to make sure that people are matched appropriately in that way. And the other thing I would say is that more preferences beyond that would be very difficult to do because the pool is still pretty small. So maybe down the road when we get lots and lots of growers and landholders listed, it'll be a little easier to match on other grounds. But right now, safety is the biggest concern. We don't want to set up any matches that are going to set up people for any kind of risk. So once you have been connected to either your landholder or gardener, first conversation you want to have will be to use these questions. So it's to get a sense if the other person is a good match for what you're looking for. You'll talk about how the work will be done, who's responsible for what pieces of work, how the produce will be shared, if there's any considerations about using this space. And once you're satisfied with those answers, then we have a separate section for the gardeners to do a site assessment visit. So to go actually to the space and take a look at the space and think about, does it have all of the qualities that you need in order to produce food? You could potentially do photos, but I don't think that's a good way to really get a sense of the site, because you never see all of the angles in a photo. So I highly recommend that you go in person to see the site. And for the landholder, I think it's good to go through the site assessment questions before you even post your listing, because for one thing, it'll help you to describe your space to someone who's looking for a growing space. But for another reason, if anything comes up that you didn't stop to think about, oh, well, you know, maybe this is not such a good space for gardening, or it's good for a particular kind of gardening, like container gardening, for instance, then you can put that in your description and you know in advance. So once the site assessment is done, then you would have a second conversation where you get together and go through the sample agreement and really nail down the kinds of things that it is that you're hoping to do. Now, this agreement is not a legally binding document, but it does make you think through and communicate what your needs and expectations are, so that you can be as clear as possible, and so that you have a record of what you've both decided and agreed to, if ever you need to remind yourself, to remind the other person, hey, this is what you said, you'll have it on record. So that's another reason for us to recommend going through the process, even though it seems like a lot of work, but really it will help you to head off some problems that will cause a lot more heartache and aggro down the road. So I think at this point, we're going to stop and ask some questions. If you've read through the tools and you have any questions about how they work, we can talk about that now. And it looks like we have one question from Jesse. Is it best to match people geographically close to each other? And I think that's a great question. Thanks, Jesse, for asking it. We do on the forums ask gardeners what their main intersection is, and we ask the landholders for their intersection and address. The address is just for our internal needs. It's not to post publicly. But the reason for knowing that is just being realistic. If you have to travel an hour to get to a garden site to tend a garden on a regular basis, you know, that could be a bit of a red flag for a landholder to say, well, you know, are you really going to be able to do that kind of ongoing maintenance? So just a little bit of reality testing there. Okay, and now for the great question, or the great conversation about what can go wrong. That we're not talking about this stuff to scare you off of the idea of garden sharing, but really just to let you know that these things are possible, they could happen, and to help you be proactive about stopping them from happening. So if you think about it, anytime that you're sharing space with people, whether it be roommates, office mates, neighbors, whatever it is, there's going to be the potential for tension and the potential for conflict. So we want to try and think about ways to heading these conflicts off. I'll make a note here that if you're sharing a garden space in a commercial space, the issues may be very different. A commercial landholder will probably have different concerns compared to being actually in someone's living space, like the place that they consider home, where they spend most of their time, whatever, where they're most comfortable. So the issues are a little different. So I think some of the most profound problems come from unspoken expectations and assumptions. One of the big ones is, what does a food garden look like? So we have a photo here on the left-hand side. Maybe someone thinks that it's supposed to look like a very neat, orderly English garden. Someone else might think that a garden looks like the one on the right, which just happens to be my backyard jungle. Very productive, but not everyone's cup of tea. So being clear about, what do you expect, particularly if you're the landholder and you're inviting someone to come and grow food. Do you want the English garden look, which is fine. Maybe you're concerned about what your neighbors think about your front yard. That's okay. Just make sure that you articulate that and that you're clear. The other kind of assumption, I think, is about what stake people feel that they have in the garden. So a grower may think, I put a lot of work into this space. I should have control over it. And a landholder may think that, well, I own this property and I have the right to do what I want with it. So, and not to say either one is right or wrong, but just to understand that this is how people may be thinking and not necessarily expressing. So try and understand both in yourself what your assumptions are, but try to put yourself in the other person's shoes to understand what their assumptions might be. It's also really important to acknowledge that there is a power differential in this relationship. Now, regardless of what kind of privilege you have based on your personal identity, your social location, I think it's fair to say that gardeners generally are taking the bigger risk in this relationship. They will invest a lot of time and energy into a space, and if things go wrong, they have a lot to lose. So I think it's just important to acknowledge that someone offering up space for gardening, it really is a gift, but also that the effort and the knowledge that comes from the gardener is a gift as well. And apologies if this is a really obvious thing to say, but this relationship should be founded on the respect and the value of what each person brings. And if that's not there, that's when things start to go wrong. So you may think, I respect this person entirely, but does your outward behavior reflect that respect? And always be checking in on that, I think is a good practice. The other thing to say is that garden sharing is not a volunteer program. Sure, you may be growing food for a community food program and donating produce. The landholder may be a senior or someone who is looking for some help to look after their property that they can't do anymore. But it's not a volunteer program, and it's actually an exchange of services. So providing land and then providing the care for the land. So it is an exchange and needs to be considered that way. Okay. So now we're going to take some time for Angela to share some of her funny stories about some things that have actually come up in the garden sharing program, just to give you a few ideas again of what could happen.
Sharing has happened. We've collected some few good stories, and this is a collection from Rhonda's stories, and I love them. So one of the ones, what are some things that we, when you're writing and talking about your expectations, what are some things that could happen? So one is that you might come out in the morning, if you're a landholder, in your, oh, I love the Garfield picture there, in your fuzzy like slippers with a coffee, and you're about to drink, but meanwhile, there's a whole group of gardeners there, some of who you don't know there, and you actually you don't know these people that are there. And so perhaps what's happened, and you end up being quite embarrassed about what's happened. What's happened there is you may not have set out the expectation that you only wanted the gardener and people that you know there. So that's one lovely example. A lot of us live in tight quarters already, and so are aware of coming outside in our backyards. Okay, if you're doing containers, make sure you discuss the possibility of moving them. So one example is a landholder moved containers to make space for a party, and then all the plants died when the containers didn't get moved back out of the shade. And as we know, as gardeners, we put a lot of time and effort. Oh, those are so sad. And the next one is that while pesticides aren't supposed to be used anymore, that the pesticides, the landholder brought in a pesticide company and told them to spray everything. And many of us are organic, sustainable growers, and the pesticides went also on the food. And another really fun one, I love your picture there, Rhonda, is that there is an emergency contact number that you're given, but it really, really, really is only for emergencies. So it's not for when the squirrels, ate the beets or your favorite strawberries, and it's not for when you just want to tell the gardener that they didn't put the shovel away. Those are things that you might be able to share the next time the person comes in. The emergency contacts are for emergencies only. These things have happened. That's just why they're real examples. And I think what's really important, this actually came up in our conflict resolution workshop as well, is be really aware of small irritations. So let me think about your living situations. Rhonda, you gave such a great example. We interact with people all the time, and we all have experiences where something small turns into something big, unless people here are just really good at dealing with conflict. So whereas in the beginning you might have thought that a person's dog or their children were really cute running around, and all of a sudden you realized 4 weeks into it that the child who now has ran over and knocked over your fresh morning coffee is not as cute as they were anymore. So, and that them racing all over the place might not be what you were hoping for. And that might be a difficult conversation, but a really good conversation, because it's only going to get worse from there.
So those are some of the funnier examples of things that can go wrong. Unfortunately, some of them are a little more serious. So this example did happen during our Garden Sharing Network program, where we had a Black woman who was a staff person who went out to assess a yard, and the landholders hadn't told their neighbors anything about that they were going to be entering this program. And so the neighbors saw this person that they didn't know in their yard, and they came over and were very suspicious of giving her a hard time. And she was actually concerned that they were going to call the police on her. And so she just finished what she was doing and left really quickly. So we don't want to set people up for that kind of really uncomfortable and potentially dangerous situation. So what we recommend is definitely let your neighbors know that there's going to be someone that they haven't seen before come and work on your garden space, and that you've given them permission to do that. And that way kind of reduces the chance of that happening. The other thing, of course, I think we all have to consider, I don't think it happens that often, but you set up the garden arrangement, you have your agreement, the gardener starts working, they set up the garden space, and then you don't hear from them for a while. So to stop this from happening, or to be able to intervene if it does, again, it's really good to have clear language in your agreement about when a landholder can intervene if the garden is not going the way it's supposed to. At what point can they take action if the gardener isn't following through with their part of the agreement, so that it's not just, well, this isn't going the way I want it, so I'm going to take the garden out, or I'm going to harvest all the food, or whatever. You have some kind of agreement in place of these are the steps that the landholder will take before moving to that kind of extreme step. So things such as communication, if I don't hear from you, I will try and call this person, follow that thread. And once I've exhausted all the possibilities of reaching you, then I'll consider taking the garden out. And hopefully it never comes to that. But again, just being clear on what might happen and what the avenue is for the landholder in that case.